Good afternoon and welcome to the August 2023 Dibble Institute webinar on a new curriculum that's just been released by the federal government on strengthening facilitation skills. We're really thrilled to have both Erin, Welch, and Scott Roby join us and explain how this is, because I think to all of you, and there's many of you on this webinar who are facilitating youth programs, will find this super, super interesting and helpful to you. So welcome. A couple of housekeeping things. Did I say I was executive director? Anyway, doesn't matter. I'm Kay with the Dibble Institute. If you can't hear, the best thing to do is exit and enter. We had to write this down thinking maybe some people couldn't hear it right now. You know, log in, log out, use the phone system. It's probably you, probably not us. But if there's an issue, you can ask it in the question box. There seems to be, people are saying they don't have sound. Turn on the sound on your computer. And again, log in, log out, it should work. There's a hand on your control panel. So let's start using that. Here's a question for you. For how many of you is this your very first Dibble webinar? If it's your very first ever Dibble webinar in the 10 years we've been doing webinars, or 8 years, whatever it is, would you please raise your hand? Let's see how many newbies we have. Give you a few minutes here, not even a few minutes. Okay. It looks like it's about 5% of you are new, so welcome to you who are new. I'm really glad to have you here, and for all the rest of you, the other 95% who know us, you know, here's a virtual hug for you, right? We really appreciate you and all the good work you do. There is a handout also in your control panel for today's program, so you might want to identify that. So a little bit about the Dibble Institute. They were named after Charlie and Helen Dibble. They were a couple in Southern California who worked a lot with youth. Charlie was very concerned about young people's trajectories and how their lack of confidence in their ability to sustain long-lasting, long-term relationships, or watching their parents, the parents of his young friends, their relationships founder, and how it derailed their lives. Charlie decided that he was going to do something about this. So he consulted the leading researchers of the day. This was in the 80s. And they could talk to him a lot about what made for long-lasting, healthy relationships. And when he asked them, what are you doing to communicate that to young people? They said, you know, it's hard to do, hard to find them, hard to know what to say to them. And so Charlie took that as a personal challenge to try to take this research and move it into practice for young people. So next slide. So that's how we come up with the Dibble Institute. We're a national independent nonprofit. For those 95% of you who are our clients or who know this isn't your first webinar, you helped us, or you served, we believe, conservatively, 120,000 youth last year. It's just awesome. The kind of reach we can have by us getting evidence-based best practices material into the hands of professionals and experts like you to reach young people. And so we're a curriculum publisher, and many of you know us because of that. Next slide. So our mission. So every day I get up and ask myself how we can reach more young people with healthy relationship skills education. What you find is when you help young people to get smart about their love lives, it pulls a lot of other levers in their lives. There's a sexual activity lever, a violence lever, a job skills lever, a stay in high school lever. I mean, there's a lot of levers that it pulls. So our mission is really to help more young people learn how to navigate their intimate relationships. Next slide. So we have 3 core values. We're research nerds. And those of you who know us know that's true. We love research. And we also know that science is just a series of questions, and you just keep asking the questions, and sometimes you get different answers as time progresses. And I'm sure all of you have seen, I don't know, various medical, at the time they thought that injecting knees with steroids was a great idea to deal with osteoarthritis. And now they realize when you inject knees with steroids, you decrease the amount of cartilage. So they don't do that anymore. So same with research around relationships. There's some things we thought was like certain, and then time passes, there's new research, now we have new information. And the good news is that Dibble programs are all up to date with the latest research, so you can be really assured that that what you're teaching young people is what we know today. It might change tomorrow, but what we know today. Okay, next slide, please. So we're also big fans of safe, stable, nurturing families. It's where children, and one of the key reasons Charlie got into this work is what happens to children in unstable relationships. And so what we're trying to help young people create, and that they mostly want for themselves, is when those who want to form families, making sure they're safe and stable for young people. So we're less these days concerned about the legal manifestation of that. Are you living together? Are you single? Are you married? I mean, there's some data out about what are more stable families in general than others, but most important is that whatever form you have, it's safe, stable, and nurturing, and that's what our goal is and one of our key values. Okay, and the last thing is relationship education is for absolutely everyone. One of our authors this week just attended a marriage education retreat with her husband. She's been married 40 odd years. She's an expert in relationship education. And there was Marlene. I think it was somewhat of a junket. It was up to the San Juan Islands in Washington State. But be that as it may, you know, she was taking a relationship education class. So it doesn't matter if you're young or older and what flavor you are, what color you are, who you love, what your status is. It just really, all of us can benefit from relationship education. So we write our materials intentionally to be diverse and inclusive of all kinds of people, especially when you're working with young people. You just don't know who's in the room. And so we wanted to make it a safe and welcoming space by the kind of language we use in our materials. All righty, next slide, please. So super thrilled today to introduce both Erin and Scott. Erin works for Mathematica. She's a researcher working on policies and programs that advance adult learning, professional development, and engagement. And on this project, she was part of the team that conducted the Strengthening Relationship Education in Marriage Services, which is a formative evaluation to develop this curriculum, the Strengthening Facilitation Skills curriculum, in close partnership with healthy marriage and relationship education providers. Actually, I'm going to ask you another hand question. If you are an HMRF grantee, get your funding currently from ACF for a healthy relationship or marriage grant, please raise your hand. It'd be really interesting to know how many of you are here. Scott, and those of you who know Scott, who could forget Scott, Scott is the most amazing facilitator in the world. I just, you know, what can I say? I've known him for a lot of years. He's really a pro in facilitation techniques and skills, and he's worked as a doing, what's it called? TA, technical assistance with both healthy marriage and responsible fatherhood grantees, as well as sexual risk avoidance grantees, and does lots of work in Oklahoma. So he's really a pro, and it was so smart when Mathematica got this this contract to involve Scott. So I am just looking at why don't you guys pop up and let me just answer. Yes, you will have access to these slides and to the video after this webinar. We'll post it online. The handout is in your control panel, and I think you all have sound. So I'm going to bugger off, and thank you, Erin and Scott, for being here with us today.
Thank you, Kay. Welcome, everyone, and thanks so much for being here with us today. Scott and I are thrilled to be joining you. We are going to be introducing you to the curriculum that Kay mentioned, Strengthening Facilitation Skills training curriculum for programs working with youth. This curriculum draws on best practices in both participant-centered and trauma-informed facilitation. It's designed to strengthen facilitation skills, so the program environment is really set up to maximize engagement and learning for youth. The materials and the curriculum that we'll be talking about can be used by organizations to strengthen delivery of any program that they're using. It's ideal for programs with a lead facilitator, with a program manager, or another trainer who wants to improve facilitation skills of their facilitators. It can also be used by external trainers to train your facilitators. The evaluation and the curriculum creation were all conducted under the Strengthening Relationship Education and Marriage Services Evaluation, which is known as STREAMS for short. This was a large evaluation of healthy marriage and relationship education programs. It was conducted by Mathematica and Public Strategies for the Administration for Children and Families in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. This evaluation was connected to the Federal Healthy Marriage and Responsible Fatherhood Initiative, which is administered by the Office of Family Assistance. Next slide, please. Before we get started, we'd love to know a bit more about you. I know Kay asked a couple of questions already, but we'd love if you can take the poll that you see on the screen so we get a better sense of what your role is and how you interact with facilitators. So just take a moment to respond. Great, thanks. Okay, so we have a wide range of folks on the call today. We've got a lot of facilitators. We've also got a lot of program leaders and administrators and folks in other roles too. So great to see you all here today. And then our second question is about how you typically engage with facilitators. Are you a facilitator? Do you supervise them? How do you work with them, if at all? Okay, great. And again, we have a lot of facilitators with us and folks working with facilitators in other capacities as well. We think this curriculum is going to be useful for many of you, so we're happy to have you with us and looking forward to getting started. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Esther. All right, so today we're going to start by sharing a brief overview of the process that we use to develop and to refine the curriculum so you know where it came from. Then we'll talk through the curriculum components and the materials that are available with it. All of these are free and publicly available online. We'll talk through who might benefit from the materials and how you would use them. And we'll share some tips from the field about using this curriculum as well. We'll make sure to save time at the end for questions, so feel free to send those along in the chat as we're going, and then we'll be saving time for them. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. Let's dive in, and you can go ahead and advance to the next. So we want to start by sharing a little bit about how we designed this curriculum, so you have a sense of where it comes from, how it got to the place it's at now, and why it may be helpful for you. We used a formative evaluation to design and then to test and refine this training curriculum. We intended for it to be used by HMRE supervisors and facilitators, but as we've said, it can be used by other programs that serve youth as well, and we'll talk more about that later. Mathematica and Public Strategies partnered with Catholic Charities of Wayne County in New York and Youth and Family Services in South Dakota on this evaluation, some of whom are here today. They were excellent partners in helping to develop this curriculum. So formative evaluations, if you're not familiar with them, they're used to test and improve interventions over time before you scale them and get them ready for a larger audience. In our case, we used an evaluation design following the Learn, Innovate, Improve, or LI² framework. There's an image of that framework on the slide here. LI² is a three-step process. It's really grounded in collaboration between researchers and practitioners to help programs design and then to test improvements to their programs. For us, we started collaborating very early on with the sites that we were partnering with, even before we tested and refined the curriculum. During the learn phase of the evaluation, we had interviews with facilitators, and we talked with them about the challenges that they were facing in their programs. so that we could then make sure the curriculum was meeting those needs. We also had collaborative conversations with the sites that were involved to pick the training topics that would be most useful for them. The resulting curriculum has 3 modules, and we developed it by drawing on evidence-based facilitation strategies, and then we refined it based on the experiences we had testing it in the field and having conversations throughout. Next slide, please. We gathered evidence throughout the evaluation to iteratively refine the curriculum during each of 3 cycles. Each cycle started with a training, and then the facilitators would test out the strategies that they learned in the training, and then we collected data on their experiences to learn from how it was going. We had interviews with the program facilitators and with their supervisors. We also conducted observations of facilitators, and then we used the data that we collected to refine the training materials. For example, one thing that we did as we were looking at the data, we heard that it would be helpful to have more practice in the training. And so we added teachbacks to the training materials. Those are a chance for facilitators to prepare and then to practice delivering part of a lesson, but they use the facilitation strategies that they just learned in the training. And then they get feedback from their peers and from the trainer on how that went. And so they all get the opportunity to practice together. After facilitators had time to test out the facilitation strategies and after we collected data within each cycle, we had debriefing discussions with facilitators and with supervisors to get ready for the next cycle and to go back and improve the materials from the last training. Throughout the process, we used human-centered design techniques because it was really important to get everyone's voice in the room and as we were gathering feedback, make sure that everyone could contribute. If you're curious about this process, there is a report that describes the formative evaluation, which we'll show you the link to, and it talks about the whole curriculum development process and some lessons learned as well from facilitators and supervisors who participated. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about the curriculum. It has 3 modules. As I mentioned, these were selected by the sites that were participating based on the needs and the challenges that they were seeing in their programs. The first facilitation skills training module is on managing energy. It's designed to increase facilitators' understanding of how youth energy naturally changes during the day, and it teaches them how to use techniques to manage energy in the classroom. The second training is called debriefing and drawing out teachable moments. It trains facilitators to ask questions after each lesson or each activity to help really draw out the key learnings that youth are having. And then it helps them to connect what they've learned to past lessons and to their lives. Finally, building trust and challenging the comfort zone helps facilitators to build trust and to challenge youth to start exploring new skills and new behaviors. The facilitators who participated in the evaluation tested out the strategies that they learned after each facilitation skills training. They said they found value in the facilitation skills trainings, and they felt like the strategies that they learned enhanced their facilitation skills and improved youth engagement. Next slide, please. Now you might be wondering who this curriculum may be a good fit for. So let's talk a bit about that and why or how you might want to use it. The curriculum can be used by organizations that provide group-based education and prevention programs. So this could vary, but it might include HMRE programs, dating violence prevention programs, social and character development programs, and sexual risk avoidance or teen pregnancy prevention programs. It's intended to be used by program staff like supervisors and facilitators who are really trying to raise the quality of facilitation and who really want to engage youth more effectively in their programs. It can boost facilitators' confidence, and it can help build facilitators' knowledge about effective strategies to engage youth, all in service of improving learning for youth. Your trainees would ideally have some experience in the classroom and with the curriculum that you use, just so they have some context going into the training. but it's also okay if they don't, if they are new and you want to train them too. The curriculum can be used with any substantive curriculum that facilitators provide to youth. It can supplement curriculum-specific trainings that organizations may already receive and really build on what you're learning elsewhere. The strategies taught can also be useful in any program. So during the evaluation, the facilitators that participated used the strategies in different settings. They used the strategies in both traditional school settings and in other locations. For example, they were in juvenile justice centers and community-based organizations. So it can be used anywhere. The curriculum has a trainer's manual, which is designed to be really a detailed roadmap for a trainer. Programs that are able to identify an experienced facilitator inside or outside of the organization to deliver the training could use that to prepare facilitators to learn these strategies. We'll talk more about that later. Next slide, please. Scott's going to now share more about the curriculum. He'll talk through the different materials that are included, and he'll share more about how they can be used.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. So next slide, please. As you can see, the curriculum has 4 key components or 4 key pieces. Number 1 is the trainer's guide and the accompanying slide decks. Number 2 would be a whole variety of tools for facilitators to be able to use, both in planning and in delivering in a workshop setting. It also has a supervisor observation form and tip sheets that go along with them. So we'll take a look at each one of these individually. So next slide, please. The trainer's guide, as we mentioned, is really intended to be a detailed roadmap, ideally for, as Erin said, a program manager or a skilled or lead facilitator, and they can then use it to train a group of facilitators or potential supervisors in the content. The introduction includes guidance on who might benefit from the facilitation skills trainings and the structure of the curriculum and other practical considerations and suggestions for how you might use it. There's a separate module for each of the facilitation skills training topics. So as we mentioned, there's managing energy, debriefing, and building trust. The modules also have accompanying slide decks that the trainer or whoever's doing the training within your organization can use as they present the training to trainees. Next slide, please. Each module contains tips for the trainer and other things to consider as they prepare to deliver the content. It includes key takeaways that you can use to anchor the trainer as they go through the entire curriculum. It also has logistical information like materials needed, objectives, and timing for the full modules and the individual lessons within each module. They include detailed talking points with suggestions for how the trainer can tailor them to trainees' needs. So if you have very new instructors that you're bringing on as onboarding, there's something for them, as well as seasoned facilitators can also benefit by going through this, because there's a nice combination of both theory and practical practice for those being trained. Each module also has concrete facilitation strategies that facilitators can use with youth in the programs. To foster trainees learning, there are prompts for engaging discussions and activities and opportunities for practice. Now, these activities and discussions help the trainees to better internalize what they've learned and build skills in using some of the strategies provided. The modules include guidance and suggestions for how to be responsive to youth's needs, their preferences, and their identities. Next slide. Now, each of the 3 modules have tools for the facilitators to help them put into practice the facilitation strategies that they actually learn in the training. Each module has what we call a back pocket tip card that facilitators can refer to on the fly as they're planning for lessons, or that they can quickly refer to while they're actually facilitating. These have quick tips and key ideas from the trainings. The idea being that with these small back pocket cards, they can literally be laminated and be carried in the facilitator's back pocket to use on the fly. The modules include a wealth of other resources like checklists and activity descriptions. For example, let's think about the building trust module. It includes a back pocket tip card. It includes a one-pager with tips for managing disruptive behavior in class and trust building activities, complete with a materials or props list, as well as step-by-step facilitation instructions. So they're very easy to pick up and use. And the facilitators found that as we were going through the iterations, they found that some of the materials were actually most helpful early on as they begin to explore and experiment with the facilitation strategies, and other of the materials were more helpful as they gained some expertise with the strategies and were used later on. The next slide. There's also a trainer's observation tool, and this can be used by the supervisor to observe trainees after they've gone through the training, and it gives them very focused and specific areas to observe and to provide feedback on. Now, this tool, the observation tool, includes guidance for the observer. It includes a section where you can note key takeaways for the facilitators and a section for the observer to take notes. It details things to look for that are organized by the timing. So are there things that you're going to be looking for in the beginning of the session or in the middle of the session or maybe toward the end? So they're broken down by when to look for these skills. There are also, all of the items are aligned to each of the three modules. So trainers and supervisors would ideally observe the facilitators a few weeks after the training, and then maybe a month or two later, they would use the observation tool during those observations and then hold a debrief to discuss what they observed with the facilitator. That way the facilitator is able to work on areas that they need improvement. And the sheet's really designed so that the observer can give important takeaways and the section that's called key takeaways to the facilitator immediately after the observation, so that that facilitator can process and think about their strengths and areas for growth before they meet with the observer to debrief. So next slide, please. As a supplement to the facilitation skills training, there's one tip sheet per module that provides key lessons from the curriculum. The tip sheets are 2 pages and offer essential content, quick tips, activities, and strategies for facilitators. To get the full benefits from the materials, we recommend that folks complete the full training, but as Erin mentioned, these tip sheets could also be used by those who aren't able, for whatever reason, to complete the entire training and give them some key components. Next slide, please. So how to use the materials. To use them, first off is to identify who would be conducting the training. That could be a skilled facilitator, it could be your program manager, it may be you have someone designated as a master facilitator or lead facilitator. And ideally, when we were thinking about group size, it would be ideal to train a group of 10 to 12 facilitators, but obviously some programs don't have that many. So it's designed to be a group activity, and then determine the facilitator's needs. So are these new folks or are these seasoned facilitators? And by understanding that, you can decide which facilitation skills and trainings you may provide. You could provide them all in sequence, or you can use them independently. An organization could choose to provide one of the three, for instance, or choose to do all three. The modules can be delivered in any order, though just so you know, they were tested out in the order that they're presented into the manual. We suggest that you space the facilitation trainings out over time because that spaced repetition gives people to take in some information, digest it, practice with the skills, and then add something new to the repertoire. However, you could deliver them consecutively if you so choose, but personal preference, I think that spaced repetition gives more time to assimilate new information and put them into practice. Before each facilitation skills training, obviously the trainer should review the trainer's guide and the slides to practice and prepare, but they should also present or print out the slides and supplementary materials for each of the trainees. In general, we estimate that each facilitation skills training would take about 4 hours, but know that that timing will vary depending on a couple of things. Number one, the size of your group, and number two, the optional activities that you decide to include, as well as your debriefing or group thinking process. So it could easily go beyond 4 hours and make it a 1-day, 6-hour training for each module. After each training, the facilitators should intentionally practice and use the strategies they learn, referring to the printed slide deck and supplementary materials as ongoing supports. As we discussed, following the training, the supervisors or trainer should observe and debrief with facilitators to continue to foster their learning over time. So with that, I'll turn it back to Erin to go through the uses of the curriculum. Erin?
Thank you, Scott. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. All right. So as we mentioned, the facilitators and supervisors who participated in the facilitation skills trainings and tested out the facilitation strategies found the curriculum to be useful. They felt like youth were more engaged after facilitators had received the trainings, and they shared a lot of lessons learned along the way with us, which we have included in the formative evaluation report, but we want to highlight a few from you so you can hear them verbally and start to think about these. So first, they found that the strategies in each of the 3 different training modules worked well together and complemented each other nicely. For example, they said that when they made sure that they were managing youth energy, it allowed them to better leave enough time at the end of sessions or at the end of activities for a debrief. Across all of the modules, they said that making sure that they were planning ahead was absolutely essential. And both facilitators and supervisors reported this. So they said that they planned ahead to identify when they would incorporate the strategies they learned into lessons and to think about which strategies were going to be most appropriate for the content and the activities in different lessons. They didn't just go in on the fly, although they found materials like the back pocket tip card helpful for moments when they needed a reference, but they typically felt it worked best when they went in with a clear plan on what they were going to use when and in which lessons. They found that the strategies were generally applicable in different settings and with different types of groups. We heard that they used some strategies more than others, depending both on their preferences and the needs of the students in their classrooms. They considered the broader dynamics of their groups, they considered the age group of the youth they were working with, and so on. For example, they found that some strategies worked better with older youth and others worked better with younger. So they were able to tailor based on what was going to fit best for the groups that they were working with. they shared that debriefing strategies were the most difficult for facilitators to learn. They took time and they took ongoing practice. That kind of speaks to, again, the benefit of spacing out the trainings if you're able to, like Scott mentioned, especially for something like debriefing where it's a bit more challenging. It helps to have that additional time to practice and get to know it. That being said, while it took this time and this ongoing practice, the facilitators found a lot of value in the debriefing strategies, and like it helped youth really get to deeper learning in their lessons. And then finally, I'll share that we found cohorts of youth whose facilitators were trained on at least one of the curriculum modules. The youth were statistically significantly more likely to say that they thought the program helped them as compared with cohorts of youth that were taught by the same facilitators, but before they received the facilitation skills training. Next slide, please. All right, so on this slide, you'll see the URL to the materials, all of the materials, and including both the formative evaluation report and then the curriculum supporting materials and tip sheets are located on the same page here, which the PDF of the slides will be shared with you so that you have this. Our contact information is also on the slide. And before we go to questions, we'd love to just show you what this webpage looks like so you know where the different materials are and how to find them. So I'll wait a moment till Esther's ready to share her screen. Great. So this is the webpage that has all of the materials. When you get to it, the first thing you'll see at the top where it says download report, this is the formative evaluation report that I was talking about. It talks about the whole process of developing the curriculum, gaining input from the facilitators and supervisors who participated, and it includes some of what we learned from them along the way. And then if you scroll down, there's going to be information giving an overview of the evaluation and its goals and research questions. And then when you continue down, you'll start to get into the curriculum materials. So first you'll see the overview, which has been shared with you today as well. Below it, you can see the link to the training slides that the trainer can use. Next are the supplementary materials that Scott was talking about. These are checklists, handouts, those back pocket tip cards, the observation tool for supervisors to use. All of those materials are located in the supplementary materials document. And then you have the trainer's guide. This is that detailed roadmap we were talking about for the trainer to use as they get ready to train facilitators. It has all of the talking points, all of the activities, it's all in the trainer's guide. And then finally, we have the 3 tip sheets, which are those shorter 2-pagers that are a supplement for the training for those who can take the full training, or they could be used in a pinch for people who aren't able to take the full training. So we will pause there, I think, and we can open it up for questions now. Kay and Esther, if you want to share those with us.
Yeah, excuse me, that was great. I mean, what it says to me, based on the data you have, is that facilitation is not like falling off a bike. It actually helps if you've been trained and not just, you know, I mean, and we're people who are into the content, right? Dibble provides trainings and we help people get oriented to the process of working with young people. But it sounds like you all really have made this quite, you know, extensive and really helpful to people to make better, even better outcomes than what they would normally get. So I think that's awesome. So I am finding one of your colleagues who participated in this. Let's see if Marianne Solanina, can I pull you up? Marianne, I know you're there. Okay, well, until Marianne gets here, let's see, she might be ducking us. She may not know that she's on, but okay. So, what was the biggest challenge that you found the people who were implementing this program? What was the biggest challenge for implementing the training of the facilitators? You know, what was the biggest challenge?
That's a good question. You know, they were extremely receptive. I think probably the biggest challenge is always unlearning habits that aren't helpful, because every facilitator has little go-to phrases. They have their own way of doing things. Sometimes that's not always that helpful. Give you an example. It's real easy to get into a habit of, you know, calling out somebody and saying, hey, you know, Kay, why don't you answer this question? Well, in certain settings, that can really put people on the spot and actually shut people down, rather than engaging folks. So helping folks understand that, being intentional, or I should say, helping people understand that just because you're trained in a curriculum doesn't make you a skilled facilitator. And probably the single most challenging thing was also the most difficult, and that was the debriefing. Being able to ask questions in the right sequence to lead to an outcome, not just saying, oh, great thought or great insight.
So we have some good questions. So Madeline asks, what is one of the most important facilitation techniques that you found?
Gosh, I think, again, along with that, I think debriefing is probably the most powerful single thing, because most every curriculum that's out there has a number of activities in it. Some curricula have debriefing questions to put out there after an activity or something. But it's about taking that activity, helping people see what just went on within their group, exploring with them what that actually means in the context of the topic that's being covered, but then going one more step and going to the now what questions. Now, what will you do next time this happens in real life? So it's taking it out of the classroom, moving it into real life, so that it doesn't just stay theory, it moves to practical application into real life. I think that's probably the single most important thing, both for me as a facilitator to do and for benefit for the students.
Okay, here's one I can answer myself. This is free. It's our tax dollars at work, and we will send you the link to it so you can download it yourself. It's like two manuals, a couple hundred, 100 plus pages each, but it's totally free. Okay, so Scott, so the staff, Jason asked, so the staff, or to be the trainers, are going to train themselves before they train the facilitators? Is that the idea, that if you're training facilitators, you get to this website, you download the stuff, you commit it to memory, and then you go train your trainers? Is that train your facilitators? Is that the
right? So if Jason's the program manager, then he'll want to get the information and review the content and then train his staff. The idea is the trainer's guide is written in a way that it speaks to the trainer teaching facilitators, right? And then it also at the same time equips facilitators through their practices with new tools to then take into the classroom. But yes, first off, Jason, it would be you learning it yourself and then training your own staff. We tried to not make it incumbent upon you having an outside trainer come in. We tried to make it extensive enough where you can pick it up and train your own staff.
Okay, so about what was the time span that you developed this curriculum and tested it?
Oh gosh, Erin, what was it all totaled? About 18 months, 2 years to go through the different iterations.
So we tested it over the span of, I think the facilitators were testing everything out over the span of about a year, but then there was a longer process of continuing to refine. So we refined the materials on an ongoing basis during that time, while we were gathering feedback from them, while they were testing things out, in between the trainings, while we were debriefing with them. But then there was a long process afterward where we really analyzed the data that they'd shared, their feedback, and refined the materials further based on everything we had learned from them.
So what would be the years? You know, this was 2015 to 2020 or
2018 to 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So Rebecca asks, I'm assuming that this training would be helpful for all facilitators, no matter what program they are presenting?
Yeah, it's not reliant upon any specific curriculum. Yep.
And will this work outside a classroom setting? I work with homeless, says Star. I work with homeless youth 16 to 24, and we do a series of life skills training.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I used all of these exact same skills for 25 years as a ropes course instructor. So they definitely work with corporate groups. They work with youth. They work with adult groups, anybody. These are basic facilitation skills.
So early on, Erin, you mentioned something about youth with trauma. So what account was taken in the development of the program for youth coming from a trauma-related relating challenging behaviors in the classroom? So how did trauma inform this curriculum?
Would you like to take that one?
Sure. So a big part of that is covered in building trust and challenging the comfort zone, because many students are going to be reluctant to go into this new territory and explore new skills, to explore relationships when they don't trust the facilitator. Trauma adds to distrust. When people have experienced trauma, they tend to be much more hesitant to step out of their comfort zone. And as we all know, learning new skills, and actually life in general, really begins at the edge of our comfort zone, right? And so it's absolutely essential to be able to step out. So there's a lot of time taken, there's a lot of time taken in helping the facilitators build trust with the group so that the youth will follow them, and understanding that their participants, the students, may have experienced trauma in their life. It helps clue facilitators in to go slowly, not rush the process.
So how did can you provide, this is Lucas, can you provide some information on how youth feedback influenced the creation of this curriculum and how that feedback was gathered?
We did not collect, and Scott, you can speak to this more too if you have anything to add, but we did not collect ongoing feedback from youth, but there were surveys of youth prior to the start of the trainings and then afterwards to learn about how they were experiencing their programming. But it didn't directly ask them questions about these facilitation strategies. It was overall, there were more overall questions about their learning and experience with the programming. Scott, is there anything you would add?
Yeah, the facilitators provided the feedback because they were better equipped to gauge how those worked, if it really enhanced their delivery of the curriculum in the classroom. So we actually sought the facilitators' feedback. And one thing that I don't know if we mentioned, the facilitators at each site, they actually chose the topics. We had a list of 11 topics. They picked these 3 topics to develop the training on. So it wasn't something that we had in mind and said, here, let's check these 3 things out. The facilitators ranked them and rank ordered them as far as what they perceived was the importance to a facilitator.
So how would you engage, Scott, put on your hat here, how would you engage youth who don't want to talk? Asked Gordon.
Yeah, that's always a challenge. What we've got to understand is there are many ways to participate. So for example, in an activity, there will be some students, and I've had many students that want to keep that hard face on and keep up their reputation. And so they don't want to play a game. And I say, great, okay, so in this activity, you participate by being a line judge. This is the out of bounds line. If anybody crosses that line, you can call them on it, right? Nobody can question your judgment because you are the line judge. When I've allowed different levels of participation, you'll find even those hardened students after a while. And I remember I've got one kid in my mind that was very hard, and most all day long we were doing activities and talking. He didn't want to be involved in any of them, so I had him as a line judge. And about 3/4 of the way through the day, he said, well, I guess somebody else can take my place. I said, great. So what would you like to do now? Would you like to? And he goes, well, I guess I can join in, participate. Okay, great. So the less we tend to force and push it on people, and the more that we provide options and how they can participate, the safer it feels. Sometimes that's no more than just a facade that they use to protect themselves.
Joe asks, would this curriculum be appropriate for facilitating with adults? Many of our participants are younger adults since we are mostly working with young fathers.
Absolutely. Yeah, it works for anybody. Because again, these are basic facilitation skills, and whether they're youth or adults, the idea is taking the information from the classroom out into real life. And that's what a good debrief does.
So any techniques for system involved youth?
Nothing different. It's the same thing. You start by managing the energy. You have to get people in that sweet spot where they're excited and they're engaged, because that's the sweet spot of learning. When their energy starts to slip and they start getting sleepy or the phones come out, that should be a cue to a facilitator that we need to pick up the energy level in the room. So we need to pause the content for a moment and really do something to get the energy back up in the room so that we move back to that sweet spot of learning. And that's whether they're folks inside or out. I've used these exact same techniques with incarcerated adults or kids in juvenile detention facilities. So it totally applies.
So actually, I'm gonna ask something here. So Stephanie asks, so this is not a formal training for trainers to go through. It is a self-directed training, and then we can train others, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so my follow-on question is, because the Dibble Institute wants to be helpful and wants to, put things out there, by a show of hands of you 300 people who are in the webinar, what would be your interest level in getting trained in this program by Scott? You wouldn't be paying for the program, you might be paying a little bit for the training. How many of you would like to be led through it a little bit? Just put up your hand, and then Scott and I will talk later. No promises, just wondering. Okay, so put up your hand if you're interested. Okay, what are good tips? Rosabelle says, what are good tips to get parents? It's hard for me to understand this. What are good tips to get parents engaged in the topic when they're trying to take over the training, sharing information not related to the topic? Oh, what happens when people and adults, sounds like, get off topic?
Yeah, that's always a challenge. Now, if it's a parent, if you're doing a class where parents and kids are attending together, number one, that's a really unique opportunity. But I rarely ever push back on what people say in class because they've picked that up somewhere along. I just simply come at it, that's one way of looking at it. And I get how you might think that way. But if it's a research-based item, I can say, but it just doesn't hold up with research. For example, cohabitation is one that makes a lot of sense. People think, well, I want to try out this relationship. But when you put that in research, cohabitation actually adds risk to your relationship breaking up versus making it stronger. So there are lots of things we think make sense, but they don't hold up in research. Now, if it's not research-based item, then I would just say that might be the way you're thinking, but what's a counter perspective? And I would elicit counter perspectives to bring multiple points of view into the conversation and not just let that one irrelevant comment stand on its own.
Yeah, that sounds smart, because I think if you were to say, no, that's not right, or come back and talk, they would just shut down, and other people might shut down. And so what you've done is very welcoming to keep the conversation going.
It squelches conversation, and you want conversation.
Right. So what part, Eve asks, what part did culture play in the development of the curriculum?
You know, culture was a part that we really looked at strongly. We had geographically a diverse culture because we had in South Dakota, you had a primarily rural population, and in New York, there were rural and urban populations that were being served. We tried extensively to get onto one of the reservations to bring in a Native American perspective, and just were not able to make that happen within the time frame. But as far as cultural adaptations, I can't think of any specifically that we, obviously it's because when you get into cultural adaptations, there are so many variations, it would be difficult to write in a paper how to make adaptations for each specific culture. That's more incumbent upon the individual facilitators to know their population and know how to make those adjustments on their own. So I could speak to some cultures I've worked with, but that may not translate. Sorry, go ahead, Erin.
Oh, that's fine. I also think the building trust module, it really emphasizes the importance of understanding the group that you're working with, who they are, what their needs are, and throughout you should be tailoring the strategies that you're using based on the students you have in the room. So I think that's true throughout.
Yeah, excellent. All righty. Well, thank you all so much, both so much for coming. To those of you who are here, we will be sending you an email with links to this curriculum, the facilitators curriculum, also link to the or directions on how to get a copy of this webinar so you can share it with others. It'll be available by early next week for sure. And if you have any questions, you saw Scott's and Erin's emails, or you can write us at Relationship Skills at the Dibble Institute. Alrighty, so next slide. Next month, super fun. We're going to have Dr. Alyssa McElwain. She's going to kill me. Anyway, McElwain talk about a project she just did where they used college students to teach other college students the program Love Notes. Often we think, how do we get this information around healthy relationships to students? And I think Alyssa has some really great ideas. So I hope you come on the second Wednesday on September 13th. And I think that's the last slide. So I appreciate you all being here. You get 2 minutes or 3 minutes off early for good behavior. And we'll look forward to seeing you next month.